I'm Barry Hartman, and you're listening to the Tools of the Trade podcast.
Welcome, please welcome
to another episode of the Tools of the Trade podcast, your number one construction industry resource. Hear conversations with industry professionals to get the tools, stories, and advice that you need to set your career on fire. You're now streaming the Tools of the Trade podcast.
Barry, it's awesome having you on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. And I just wanted to start the podcast off actually by giving a shout out to your right-hand man, Scotty, just so that people understand that there are two people involved in 505. So shout out to Scott. And, the place that I like to start with these episodes is getting a taste of what your position in your day-to-day is currently like. So what do you call yourself, and what does a day look like in the shoes of Barry Hartman?
That's a great question. So it's funny because even when it was just Scott and I starting a junk removal company out of my parents' basement in 2011, I always seemed to carry this role and title of the CEO. And so people would make fun of me. There's just two of you. How are you the CEO? Who are you managing? And we always just kept that title. And I think it's because it's developed and now that title is actually somewhat relevant, because it's more of a focus now on, I guess, managing and coaching the leaders in our company. So our general manager, Alex Elsey, for Vancouver, he's been with us since 2012. And we actually just announced his partnership 2 nights ago at a team meeting. BV, she runs our office operations. Neil with her marketing. Jose's our operations manager. And of course, Scotty, who's our head of sales and marketing. So I get to work with a little bit of everyone. And I really like that part because it allows me to kind of stay engaged in all elements of the business, but not actually actively implementing or, executing the plan, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So what do you do all day? Like, what is the role of a CEO of a growing and expanding junk removal company look like?
So it's interesting. We're definitely not in the field anymore. So it's definitely a full-time office job. I'll usually start my days on Monday, just really getting organized on the week, trying not to work over the weekends as much anymore, although the odd Saturday does seem to creep up once in a while. So Mondays, I like to kind of get the week organized. I've been trying to go to the gym actually 4 or 5 times a week, which is new to me. And so that's usually 6 till 7 a.m. And we'll come in usually around 9 o'clock in the morning. We'll have a quick daily huddle with the team, check in. Everyone checks in on their goals from the day before and sets their goal for the day. It usually lasts around 5 or 6 minutes. There's really, really rapid fire, and then everyone kind of goes off on their day. Fridays, I've got reserved for all my team meetings. So we run goal setting and review meetings where we check in on their goals for the week. We check in how they're doing personally and try and, remove the business out of it for the first 5 or 10 minutes. Everyone's always going through highs and lows and everything in between. So I feel like it's my responsibility to just give them a voice to, talk about what's good, what's bad, and everything in between. Along with running the team meetings, I still carry quite a few accounts in mainly on the construction side of things. We work with a lot of big general contractors and developers across the Lower Mainland, and the accounts are quite complex, where we'll be working with multiple project managers, who of course are working with many superintendents on many different job sites, and we really focus on making sure everyone's happy and the jobs are being fulfilled and customer promises are being met. And I would say that occupies quite a bit of time. And then the last is going to a lot of strategic planning and all the finances as well as budgeting.
And that's a full-time job, it sounds like. Now, entrepreneurs typically, they kind of avoid the trap of going to school. And I'm actually not too sure what your educational background was like. And for those listening, I know that you did have a professional sponsorship as a snowboarder with Coors Light, but did you actually go to any sort of post-secondary education, or did you jump straight into the junk removal?
That's a good question. So the resume is, for the most part, pretty ugly. Started working when I was about maybe 14 years old, just going door to door, walking dogs and cleaning cars and trying to land babysitting gigs. And that kind of carried me through high school, as well as being a dishwasher at a local restaurant. At 17, I moved to Whistler, British Columbia, in pursuit of a dream to be a professional snowboarder. And so, we during the daytime we'd snowboard every day, trying to build the skills and make videos and just try and attract some local sponsors. And then in the evening, was actually a janitor from 5 p.m. until 3 o'clock in the morning every night. And
No way.
yeah, so it built up actually really good work ethic, especially, we were living in a house that was 1,000, or no, it was about 500 square feet with 3 other people. So, you build that sense of resiliency just to kind of get the job done. And over time I ended up actually having a good little career in snowboarding. We traveled down to Chile and Argentina. We were doing competitions across North America, and we were attracting, or I was attracting some sponsors like Coors Light and Smith Optics and a few others. So that was going until about, I would say, 22 years old. And I decided to have a pretty significant ankle break, which put me on the couch for 6 months playing soccer of all things, not even snowboarding.
No way.
And that's when we started the business plan for 505 Junk. That was also the cue to enroll in marketing management at Kwantlen Polytechnic University in Vancouver. And that lasted, actually, that's where Scott and I actually met. And we lasted the majority of a diploma, but we dropped out with one course left and launched the company. So I guess at some point it makes sense to go back and finish that diploma. But
yeah, maybe you could just pick it back up and finish it off. But so how did you guys even come up with the idea to become a junk removal company? Like, what were the early days like between you guys?
we never really winged it, actually. I would say we were always very intentional about what we were doing. We did create a full-on business plan for it, and we knew we wanted to really stand out from the crowd. And what we liked about, I would call it the waste management industry overall, is that there isn't kind of like a glass ceiling over. There's unlimited opportunity for growth with it. It's an industry that's global and can be niched down to a small market, or you can expand nationally or internationally. So we like that part of it. We also like the impact side of it, where, if we stuck to our values of just doing the right thing and taking care of our clients, we could provide a really good service, but also removing waste from the local landfills. Scott and I actually grew up in Tawasin, just a couple minutes apart from each other. And 10 minutes away is, it's called the Vancouver Landfill. It's actually located in Ladner. And holy smokes, that place is just a giant mountain full of garbage. And all the city's garbage just ends up there. And when we first started, the recycling and diversion at that landfill was next to nothing. You could pretty much dump anything in there. So we were trying to lead the way by, recycling all the electronics and metal and wood products and construction site debris and mattresses and box springs. And fortunately, in the last 9 years since we started, it's not so much an initiative anymore. It's more of a policy and requirement. So that's kind of, I guess the direction where it's going.
Yeah. Now, obviously, 505 is taking you guys to quite a few interesting avenues of waste management and junk removal, and lots of transitions and different things you've experienced along the way. But getting back to you and your background, I was looking at your accolades on LinkedIn, and there's just a ton of stuff there. Board of Directors for Small Business BC, advisory board for and student mentor for Yale. And one of the things that stood out to me was the G20 Youth Apprenticeship Summit that you went to in Turkey. And I did a little research to see what that was all about, but I was hoping you could just elaborate on what that experience was like and what exactly it was.
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, when you list everything out there, I've honestly never thought about this myself, but there's actually there's a very common theme. And I've never thought about this till now. And I think it's to do around youth entrepreneurship and small business. And the reason why I feel so obligated to give back to those sectors, whether it's Yale, which is more focused on high school students, or being on the board with Small Business BC, which is more focused on entry-level entrepreneurs or 50 employees or less kind of thing. It's because when we first started, like the day we launched our business, we had the backing of the local community, other business owners. Everyone just seemed to really support what we were doing. And so when these opportunities came up to join boards or volunteer, it just kind of felt right and it felt good to give back. Going back to your question about the G20 Youth Entrepreneurship Summit in Istanbul, so that opportunity came up with, are you familiar with an organization called Futurepreneur?
It sounds familiar, but no, not really offhand.
They're interesting. So they work with, I guess they call it like young entrepreneurs 39 and under that are looking to get into business for the first time. And so they do really low cost financing for like startup capital to start a business. And then they partner you with a mentor and just help you in your first 12 to 24 months. So they gave us our first $15,000 when we didn't, have a dollar to our name. We were, like I said before, just in college and, coming off a broken ankle for 6 months. So not a lot of savings there. And they kind of bought into the idea that, well, we don't have a lot of money, but we've got this kind of, we've got a good business idea and we just need to get started. So they helped us with that, and they helped share a story along the way. And they flew us out to Toronto for their annual summit and paid for all the costs and everything. And when I was at Toronto, someone came up to us and they said, we're selecting 10 entrepreneurs from across Canada to head to the G20 summit in Istanbul and partake in those discussions with the other 19 nations. You should apply. And so I went through this process of, the interview stages online, and then we met with them, and they called me one day and they're like, yeah, you're good to go. You just need to raise the funds. And so here we were back at square one. We were only 3 years into business, and did the math. It was about $6,000 for flights, hotel, accommodation. Getting into the event was $900. Everything just started adding up. So I made this little post on GoFundMe and shared it online, and crickets, not a dollar. And then for whatever reason, someone piped up and said, hey, we should support this. And it was less than 2 weeks, and that whole campaign was funded. And
no way.
Yeah, it was pretty neat. It was the first experience of that kind of social, community viral element to it. And yeah, we went down, and it was pretty impressive. The first person that spoke was the president of Coca-Cola. He flew in to kind of speak to the crowd in Istanbul, and we were able to tour their local like business startup communities where they kind of house young entrepreneurs and help them launch their businesses. And the last piece, the whole purpose of the trip was so that as a community, these 10 entrepreneurs from the 20 nations could band together and come up with one document that we'd propose to the G20 leaders, which were all, I guess, presidents and prime ministers of the countries, that would then review that document and globally try and adopt this philosophy and try and, roll it out with their government initiatives. So the things we were looking at were environmental responsibility, limited access to funding for young entrepreneurs, and the whole idea of young entrepreneurs going to money to banks is that they're young, so inexperienced, and entrepreneurs, so they're high risk. And so why would a bank ever lend them money? So that's where the government steps in. Yeah, it was a good experience.
That's really cool. And so you also, you're part of the Delta Chamber of Commerce Rising Star Award, Better Business Bureau Most Innovative Company, Homestar's Best Junk Removal Company, and the list goes on. And that's quite an amazing feat. And I think you may have already touched on it a little bit, but why are you so passionate about waste management? Like, why do you put so much time into that space? I feel as though you and Scott, with so many tools at your disposal and the type of people that you are, you could put that energy anywhere. But, what drives you to get up every morning and do what you guys do?
That's a great question. And it's, I wish I could say it was about it's funny, when I first met my fiance, she's like, what do you do? And I told her I'm a garbage man. And I let her feel that for about 2 or 3 hours before I told her that, well, I also have a bit of interest in the company that we founded. But I think what it is when we first started it, we thought, okay, let's start this junk removal company. We're in college. We need to figure out a way how to get through it. And we can have some fun. And the actual completing the service is enjoyable, like actually going to a construction site and, helping them live load the waste from their site into the truck, or going to someone's house and helping them clear out their garage. It's a pretty good feeling. Like we're always solving problems. So it's rare that someone will, give you a hard time when you're on site or trying to help them out, I guess, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So it started with that, but I think where my passion has really shifted is as we started to grow and the community started to adopt what we were doing, we started to hire more truck team drivers. And then we started to promote people within. And now we have coordinators. And now there's a management team, and now we're looking at, some expansion plans. And throughout the way, originally we started a business to give opportunities to ourselves. And what I quickly realized after hiring our first employee, that it's no longer about us. And if that value of just providing opportunity and unlimited growth works for me, then I feel like if people share that same common value, then we can do a lot of cool things together. And so that's kind of my big driver on a daily basis.
Ah, that's great. It's great to give back to people and watch them grow, and it definitely feels good. Now, one of the questions that I've always wanted to ask you is it's kind of two parts. I'll get to the first part first, and then maybe you can answer the second part just because it's purely curiosity and you may or may not know. But the first question is, what's your differentiator? Because everywhere I go, and I'm sure this is the same for a lot of people, you see the 1-800 got junk guys, and it seems like there's quite a few companies out there that are in this space. What do you think makes 505 different than the rest of them?
Yeah, that's a great question. When we did our market research in 2011, there's about 140 junk removal companies in the lower mainland of BC, kind of around Greater Vancouver. And I'm sure Toronto is 4 or 5 times that just based on population size. And what we noticed is that there's always a market leader. So that's 1-800 got junk. And then everyone else just duplicated what they do, just with a different phone number or a different brand. And when Scott and I were thinking, we're like, we don't really want to be number 143. We want to be our own culture, our own vibe, our own differentiator. But we actually wanted to do something that would help us differentiate, not just, have a different website or have a different, color truck kind of thing. And so when we thought about it, we're like, well, what's the business model? They show up, they look at the material, it's a volume estimate. You go back and forth on the pricing a little bit, you load it into the truck, and depending on how much volume loads into the truck, that's how they charge, and everyone charges differently. So and then we went online and we read a lot of customer reviews on Yelp and Google and Facebook, and a lot of the complaints were around, words like expensive or ripped off, or feeling that there wasn't transparency in the pricing. And so that's when we went a little deeper and said, what if we charge by exact weight? Because that's how we pay at the transfer station. And that way we can't overcharge, but we can't undercharge our clients as well. And so we went with that model. And for the first little bit, holy smokes, it was a nightmare. We had to load the material into the truck, drive to the transfer station, unload it, get a copy of the total weight, scan that weight ticket, upload it to the invoice, and then email it to the client. And that's how every job was done.
You weren't collecting payment on site.
Never, because we didn't know what the exact weight was on site. But we were determined to charge by weight because it was fair. So the clients were happy. They were just kind of like, so you're not going to charge me for a few days until you invoice me? And so it was always this kind of funny dynamic. So one day, Scott and I were thinking, well, we better learn how to install a scale on a truck because that's the only way to make this thing efficient. And so Scott did a lot of research with a group of students at Kwantlen, and we had to source together about 4 or 5 different suppliers to build this custom truck. And I guess 6 variations later, we've got 7 trucks on the road now, and each one looks the same, but just had a little bit of technical advantages and benefits as the variations went through. We've got this truck that is super user-friendly. It's easy to use. It's safe. And we can basically load the material into the truck, print a copy of the total weight, and do all the billing right on site. And now if it's more of a construction company, and we're working more one-on-one with the superintendents or project managers, they just get an invoice with a digital copy of the weight ticket signed by the superintendent on site, and everything's nice and easy.
Interesting. I like that. The second part of my question, maybe you can or can't answer this, but 1-800 seems to park their trucks in parking lots everywhere. I noticed this in Vancouver. I noticed it out here, and they're just sitting there, no tickets on the window. And sometimes you see these things like they're clean, but they're just sitting there. And is that a marketing tactic?
There's probably a case to be made if you look at the Jimmy Pattison billboards around the Lower Mainland, and they're probably, I don't know how much they are. I would just guess maybe $3,000 or $4,000 a month for a billboard. I'm just guessing. I might be way off, but I'm guessing it's less than 5 and more than 1. And then when you look at the lease of one of those vehicles, let's say they're anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000 a month. You're kind of in that ballpark of it makes sense to just buy a truck and let it sit. So there is kind of that marketing advantage, and I know the brand awareness is a big thing in this industry. We don't do too much of it, to be honest. We try and operate a pretty lean operation, and the trucks we have are generally in use, and it's really the same thing. It's just that they're driving. So you're not going to see our trucks kind of park all around the city just for the sake of having that brand awareness, but we definitely billboard our trucks and do the full vehicle wraps and try and make them nice and shiny.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. Just in talking to you, obviously, I wanted to ask you if entrepreneurship was in your DNA, like if it's something you think you were born with. And it seems to me, with all these little nuances and things that you've accumulated in your career as an entrepreneur and a business owner, you've kind of fallen into that path, and you exhibit the qualities of a good entrepreneur from my perspective. And I'm sure your employees and your peers, but was this something that you thought of when you were younger, that you wanted to be an entrepreneur when you grew up, or was it always snowboarding?
That's a really good question. I definitely have the classic lemonade stand stories. It probably started when I was 5 or 6 years old, and you get the lemonade ingredients, and you pour the cups and put your street signs up. We did a lot of garage sales as a kid, and just bought and sold a lot of things. I would say at 10 years old, I went for my babysitter certificate and could start babysitting by 11, and make your $8 or $9 an hour. By 12 or 14, once we could start walking the neighborhoods, it was dog walking, car washing. It was dog walking, well car washing, and recruiting a dog walk while I car washed. It was, so I guess it's always there. I don't know if I label myself as an entrepreneur until I really started a business. But in hindsight, I guess I've been entrepreneurial since the day I was born. I mean, even back to now that I think about it, 4 or 5 years old, we started buying and selling hockey cards and going to the trade shows, and trying to buy the rookie cards at a lower amount and selling them for a little bit more so you get more rookie cards, and it just kept going on and on. And Pogs came out, and wasn't even
Pogs, yeah.
but I still bought them. So yeah, no, I guess it's in the blood a little bit. I know it was in my parents' blood. It was in my grandfather's blood, and I believe even his family, had a family business as well.
So was it kind of a welcome decision to make, dropping out of school and starting a company by your parents, or what did they think of you deciding that you were going to start a company? I guess it sounds like they were entrepreneurs as well, so they can probably understand. But what was their reaction?
They actually have been extremely supportive. I don't even know if it might be to a fault, but they've been so supportive of what my brother and I have always kind of dreamed to do. And even when I was in grade 11, 16 years old, I was like, I'm going to move to Whistler for the summer. Are you guys okay with that? And my mom's like, 2 months won't work, but you can do a month. And so we packed our bags and moved up to Whistler to go to Camp of Champions, and just we had a house full of people. And so a lot of people, they'd be like, oh, your parents are crazy. Why would you let a 16-year-old move out so young? Nothing happened, though. They just took that risk. I moved home a month later, and we joked about it. Actually, I moved home 3 weeks later because I broke my wrist in the first 3 weeks. But and then the day I graduated, we moved to Whistler, and that obviously was a bad idea, or not a bad idea. To a lot of people, would appear to be a bad idea. Hey, mom, hey, dad, I want to become a janitor and a professional snowboarder at the same time. What do you guys think? And they were like, yeah, go for it. If that's what you want to do, go right ahead. And I think they were, to be honest, so I think they were pretty happy when I woke up one day and said, hey, I want to enroll in marketing management. I like the sponsorship side of snowboarding. I can see how what we're doing is really promoting the brands of the companies, and I just want to learn more about the business side of it. And that's where this kind of passion of I would just call it general business just sparked. Started reading like Starbucks annual reports instead of, going out and watching a movie and just reading about how many stores they'd open in a year and pulling out an Excel sheet and calculating, well, if they can open that many stores, how many trucks can we open? And just going back and forth with teachers for several hours after the classes. And I think once they saw that this drive, whatever it was, there is some sort of drive there, could be used to build something that was more economical than, say like a professional snowboarder. I think that's when they went, oh yeah, okay, this kid's onto something.
That's great. It helps. It helps having support because it can be a lonely journey, and having good, strong people in your side, whether it's your parents or your peers, is it definitely helps. Um, One of the things that I pick up in talking to you a lot is you're casting like a vision for the business all the time. You guys are constantly thinking, what's my next move? Where's this business going? It doesn't seem like you're okay just settling at 3 or 5 trucks and having, like you mentioned, a small business that's just number 146 for waste removal companies in your area. So one of the things that I've experienced and that I'm sure a lot of entrepreneurs experience is trying to find the time to set aside to plan. And when you get caught up in the day to day and you get caught up on the tools and you're running around potentially micromanaging or trying to grow a business, you can lose sight of where you're going next. You're just trying to either get the next project in, or you're constantly stressed out about finances. So, there's always something to keep you preoccupied. And it seems to be hard to set time aside to actually think about where you want to go. And I wanted to know what strategic planning and casting a vision looks like, maybe personally or at 505, and if that's something that you do in your business and your life, or if it's more of just a business thing.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm a big believer in the in being very clear and intentional about what you want to achieve in your life, and there's no real structured way, I guess, to actually be able to predict and accomplish your future. So I guess there's two parts of it. There's the personal side, and then there's the business side. For the first 9 years of business, I scrapped all things personal. Probably abandoned one or two too many friendships, which the good friends are always there, so you can always rekindle that. Probably motored my way through way too many, not enough sleep and exercise and health and a couple, relationships. And recently I realized, especially after I met Jenna, that there's more to life than just business. And so when we actually sat down, it was Scott, Jenna, and myself. We rented a cabin in Sechelt, British Columbia, last May. And we sat down and we broke up into two groups. There's Scott, and then there's Jenna and myself. And we got really clear on what we wanted in the next 3 years. And we looked at starting like what our purpose was and our values, what we wanted individually as well as in a relationship. We looked at what we wanted from a travel and adventure standpoint. Jenna's from Brisbane, Australia, so we like to get back there a couple times a year. And I'll get to why this is related to business in a second. We looked at what we wanted from a family standpoint, from a home standpoint. We want to rent in Vancouver. We want to own in a suburb. We want to own in Vancouver. And all these decisions, when you're only thinking 3 years out, it's just far enough to be able to reverse engineer your vision into the now. If we're talking 20 years out, I have no idea. I don't know. I don't know if I want to be working 60 hours a week still because I absolutely love it, or say 50 hours a week, or if, we want to be retired on a beach in Australia. I have no idea. I'm guessing it's going to be a bit of both. But the point is 3 years out, you can really get an idea for what you want individually and as a couple or whatever your family with your kids are. And that's when we went back to the drawing board of the business and said, what does this business need to look like to support? I also spoke to a lot of different people in the company and tried to get that engaged for where the leadership team was at and what they were looking at. And that helped us understand where do we want to set the vision for the company. And so we went through the exact same process about 2 months later and figured out in 3 years from today, what does the office look like? What cities are we operating in? What's our expansion plan or expansion model? What is the organizational structure? How much revenue are we doing? What kind of profits are we seeing? how much are we sharing and giving back to the community? To what level? Is it volunteer? Is it time? Is it monetary? What does the environment look like? And so once we wrote it down, it's about a 4 or 5 page document, and we were crystal clear on what we wanted personally and in the business. From then, we reversed it back to, we skipped the second year. So we didn't do planning on the second year. We're clear on the third year, skip the second year. And then we went back to the annual strategic plan, which we do all our November preparation. In December, we build the plan. And then in January, we roll it out to the team. And by mid-February, all the org structure is redone. Everyone's on their new contracts. Bonuses are paid out. And everyone's got this kind of renewed feel to implement the plan for the year, which will get us 33% of the way to our vision. That's kind of the reverse engineering tactic. I don't know. Does that sound a little bit crazy, or is it?
No, I actually like it a lot. Hey guys, there will be more from Barry in just a sec. But before we dive back into the conversation, I have a quick message from the founder of our partner organization, Noor Hashim of Build a Dream.
Hey guys, this is Noor Hashim, president and founder of Build a Dream. Build a Dream is a national not-for-profit committed to promoting a diverse and inclusive workforce. The organization delivers specialized programs that help employers build their talent pipeline by connecting them with young women and inspiring them to pursue careers in areas that females are underrepresented. For more information, visit www.webuildadream.com. Now back to Tools of the Trade.
You talk about relationships, and obviously relationships are twofold in your life, right? So you have your fiance, which you have to manage that relationship and nurture it. And then you have your relationship with Scott. And how long have you guys been in business now together?
We met at Kwantlen in 2010, and we launched in June of 2011.
So it's been, I guess, going on 10 years here.
Yeah, pretty
And
close.
when you have a partner, obviously that relationship is hard to navigate. It's got its ups and it's got its downs. But is there one or two things you think you can attribute to the success that you guys have had as buddies, as colleagues, as business owners, as partners? Is there anything that comes to mind that has helped that be so successful?
So, first of all, I credit a significant amount of 505 John's success to Scott. And I would say there's one reason why, and it's his commitment to do whatever it takes to get the job done. So Scott's a bit of a chameleon in that sense, and he's driven by one purpose, which is to help people. Doesn't matter who it is. Could be a total stranger. He's the first person to pull over in a snowstorm and help someone get out of the snow when he's already 10 minutes late. He's the last person to leave the office. He's the first person in. And it's all out of a desire to help people. And so we actually had a lot of challenges in the first few years because I don't think we ever put Scott in a position that allowed him to help people enough. We always labeled him as the quote unquote operator, the doer. And so he's constantly doing and never really in a place where he could help people. And so recently we've put him into more of a sales role. And he's just been on fire. He's going out to events and meeting new people, and people are calling him with challenges that we're not even equipped to solve sometimes, but he'll still find someone in his network that can solve that problem for him. And I think that's what's really given us that kind of good organic growth with our construction accounts, is that they just depend on us to solve their problems regardless of what it is. So I think that's what the yin to the yang is. And then I guess the other part to it is I've got a bit of a relentless drive that, just kind of always moves forward, I guess, rarely looking in the backseat mirror. And there's pros and cons to everything. There's pros and cons to always constantly helping people because it's hard to progress. There's pros and cons to always wanting to progress because you forget to help people. And so
Right.
those two together, I guess in theory, has made a pretty strong dynamic, and which is why we have zero plans to ever, go different ways or start a different company or anything like that. And it can be, I guess, a rare dynamic sometimes. But yeah, I'm super grateful for what he's done.
That's awesome, man. I love seeing you two guys out there, and shout out to Scott. I've definitely, when I had my company, picked up the phone in a few panicked emergencies, and he was there right away trying to help or give feedback or whatever it was that I needed at that time. And I really appreciated that from both you guys and a lot of the people that I've had that I was able to reach out in the past. Brandon's another one of those guys, just great group of people to be around. I appreciate that a lot. I guess that kind of ties into the next thing that I want to talk to you about. You mentioned that you have a lot of organic internal growth, and this is kind of, it ties in a few questions. So in an industry like yours, I feel from the outside perspective that it may be tough to find and retain talent to stay in that sort of organization on multiple levels. You know, we don't have to get into specifics, but then you also have leadership skills that attract people to stick around. And I'm sure that your thoughts on leadership have changed from when you started the company to where you're at now, and also the way that you guys recruit talent and maintain that workforce and keep them on board and going so strong. And what skills do you think a leader needs to have to cultivate those relationships with their staff? What do you drill that down to?
Another good question. You put some thought into these. I think I'm a big believer that leaders need to be good listeners, because otherwise a leader is essentially just dictating what they know. And if you're never listening, then you're basically making the assumption that you know everything. And if you know everything, then what's the point of having a team in the first place? And if you don't have a team, you're not a leader. So I think this idea that, it's good to have strong opinions, and it's good to take charge when you're 100% confident in the decision, and you are more so inspiring your team to buy in what your either vision or strategy or tactic is. But to show a little bit of vulnerability and say, hey, team, let's collaborate, let's band together and figure out this big problem, regardless of, if it's a 10-minute problem at a job site, or it's what kind of vision or strategy are we building the company in. I think that the leaders that can really listen to their team and take action on that and be open to feedback are the ones that are constantly developing. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck in your own rut. And we'll have 25 employees by August. This company will have 50 employees one day. It's going to have 100. It's going to have 200. We'll have 500. And those are all different companies, which means as a leader, you're going to have to, reflect and appreciate how far you've come, but also pause and go, okay, that I can't be that person anymore. I need to redevelop into someone new that can lead, a 100-person organization, a 500-person organization, because it's a lot different than leading 5 people versus just being a solo entrepreneur, leading yourself, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. I've heard there's some factor that you can apply to that, and I don't remember what it is, but I think it's every time you apply a factor of 10 or something to a business, it is completely different. You have to adapt and change and become a completely different company.
Oh, interesting. I'll have to look into that.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what it is. I think it's 10. It's like up to 10 things take a certain shape, and then after 10 it changes again, and then when you hit 20 it changes a third time, and then it continues to evolve. But there's some science behind it, and I think even without you knowing, you're experiencing that, and you can forecast that it's going to change, and your roles and responsibilities as a good leader are going to change, and it's amazing. So you're obviously a very busy guy, and in the beginning you were, I don't know if you were more busy or less busy, but you seem to be able to say, whatever it is, you're working 50, 60 hours a week, you're trying to take the weekends off. So that means that you have to be pretty dialed in when you're at work, and you have to organize yourself and your business for efficiency. Do you have any personal tactics that you use to manage your time to ensure that you're really focused when you get down to it? I know you mentioned on Mondays you like to plan your week out, but how do you plan and organize your time to stay efficient and successful on a daily basis?
It's interesting because we all have the same amount of hours in a day. In theory, we're supposed to sleep 8, which I try and do. So that brings us down to 16 hours. It's probably good to have, an hour or 2 in the morning and at least 3 hours in the evening to eat dinner and brush your teeth. So there's another 5 to 6 hours. Now we're down to 10. So if the average person commutes to work 15 minutes to 30 minutes, there's another half an hour to an hour gone. Now we're down to 8.5, 9 hours, which usually we spend working. We're supposed to stop for breaks, and we're supposed to eat lunch, and we're not supposed to mess around on our phone, which gives us 8 hours. So the question is, what do you do with that 8 hours? Because if we work 12 hours a day at the sacrifice of spending time with our family, or at the sacrifice of not exercising, or at the sacrifice of not sleeping enough just to work more, I can assure you, you will either burn out, you will, develop unnecessary mental health issues that, were brought on by not sleeping enough or not, focusing on your own time enough. And so, it boils down to, I think, a question of two: what are your values and what are your priorities? And if you're living out of your values, it's probably a good idea to scrap those things. So I found myself spending a lot of time out in the evenings, out, meeting with clients or friends or, family members. And it was always, 9 until midnight. And, you go out and have a few drinks and, come in at 12 o'clock and then you go and do this, back to work in the morning kind of thing. And when I looked at it, I'm like, it's not really a value of mine to be out late. I would much rather be hanging out with at home and just relaxing and chilling. And so I scrapped that, and that's gone a long ways for me. The next one was exercise has always been important. I've always played sports, and it took about 2 or 3 years where I wasn't really, I quit all my team sports and stopped going to the gym, and so it was only exercising when I felt like I needed to. And so then I time blocked the gym in the morning. That's really helped. And then another interesting one was I really like reading, but I can only read in the evening, which is when I fall asleep with the book. And so now I'm not actually learning anything because I like nonfiction business books. That's what I like to read. I've never gotten into fantasy or anything like that. And so then I realized, okay, Jenna bought me some AirPods, and now you can do 30 minutes on the treadmill and run 5 kilometers, have a shower. You're 45 minutes in. At that pace, you can get through a book a week, and that's 25 kilometers a week of running. And because you're on a treadmill, you can retain that information so well because your brain's active. You're not crossing a street or at a stoplight, so you're not, you don't have to be that engaged, but you're just engaged enough where you need to at least stay upright. And before you know it, you're 30 minutes into a book, and you're 5 kilometers in, and it's only 6:45 in the morning. And so by the time you get to the office at 8, as long as you time block, and everyone's doing different things. If you're a salesperson, you're, going to the job sites all day. If you're in HR, you got staff meetings all day. If you're more in the, leadership or a CEO role, you probably got a little bit of a broad landscape where you're in lots of meetings and connecting with lots of people. But as long as you time block everything and limit yourself within a reasonable time, say 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., then you should be on pace to accomplish what you want to do, assuming you've eliminated all the stuff that you don't want to do.
Makes sense. I've had this conversation with a couple close friends of mine. One in particular, Greg Manning. He had an interesting theory or take on this. He wanted to become a developer for himself, and when we worked together in the oil sands, and he made a bunch of money. And when he was young, he bought 2 properties in Calgary, which he now has fully rented out. He thought to himself, I'm going to eventually take a step into the developer's world. But he had a really clear vision of what he wanted his life to look like by the time he hit 30 and what his core values were. And when he started working for these developers and started trying to find the company that he wanted to work for, he found that either their ethics were flawed and he couldn't do business there because he didn't believe in the way that they treated their subs or the suppliers. And then on the other hand, he looked up the chain to the people that were running these organizations or the people that were just above him in their roles, senior project managers, directors. And a lot of them had bad habits, smoking, not exercising, overweight, and a lot of issues. And a lot of them were on second or third marriage or divorced or lonely and just upset at the world. So he's actually taken a complete 360 and decided that, he was just going to go back up north, put some money in his pocket and travel because that's what he wanted to do when he was 30. And he's really living his own values and he's a lot happier for it. And I think a lot of us get caught up in trying to chase success. And like you mentioned, you put it all to the side. You think, if I just work that extra hour and, I don't go home or I stay up that extra hour and I don't sleep, and you don't realize the compound effect it has. And when you mentioned it there, that really clicked for me. Like you're running 25K a week just by, banging it out 5K at a time on the treadmill, and you're able to consume those books. But think about the opposite side. If you're sacrificing an hour of sleep and you're sacrificing your diet and your health, think about how that compounds over time and what that'll do to you mentally, physically, emotionally, and what type of leader you're going to be. You're not going to be the type of person that people roll into the office and see you and you're just like, you're fat and you're mad and you're lonely, and who's going to want to work for somebody like that? Like that's not a picture of success to your employees or to anybody around you at all.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. There actually everything you just talked about. It's I don't. You might have read this book because it was so similar, and this was really game changing for me. It's called something habits. I should almost look it up here quickly. And it talks about the compound effects of habits, both positively and negatively. And Atomic Habits by James Clear. And what he's getting at.
I've been meaning to get to that one. I haven't got to it yet.
Okay, interesting. So based on how you just were speaking, I think you really resonate with this book because what he talks about is good habits have this compound effect where, let's pick this gym thing for a second. If I go to the gym and do this for a month and run, 25K a week and get through 4 books, that's great. Good pat on the back. It's a good story. But if I stop doing that, it's useless. But if you do that consistently, 15 years from now, there's probably going to be a lot of good impact on the heart, on the brain, on the body, from a knowledge standpoint. How many books is that? That would be 4 books multiplied by 12 months is 48 books a year, times 20. I can't do the math anymore, but you can get the point. And as long as you build that habit, then it really starts to take off. And it's no different than saving money. If you save money twice a year, you put, $4,000 in the bank, it's not really going to do anything. But if you put $700 a month, no matter what, for 50 years, and every 6 months you increase that to 800, then 1,000, then 1,100 bucks, you're going to get that compound effect. And it's the exact same thing on the opposite scale. So let's say you scrap the treadmill and the reading. So no more reading at all, which means no more knowledge, which means you only know what you know, which means you're going to be outdated in 20 years because what you know now won't be relevant. And you get no exercise. And that's when we look at probably attitude decline. I would say weight increase, not the good weight. We're looking at, I don't know, I'll probably be more bitter. So who wants to be my friends? You might lose some friends. You can make all the speculations, but habits could work for you or against you.
Yeah.
Everyone has these dark secrets and no one's going to want to talk about them, about habits on, say, a low scale, which is like, I bite my fingers, for example, and I'm sure that's causing some bad stuff. Not bad enough where I'm motivated to quit, but I have habits that I probably don't want to talk about, on a podcast, but I have them and I'm changing them and I feel way better about myself. And everyone has them. And as long as you can kind of pinpoint them yourself, then you can take care of it. And if you're not that accountable or not that, say, have enough willpower, there's things like counseling you can do, where you have someone that you can speak to and they can help you, uncover your habits and help implement things. There's always an option to start to, listen to yourself, identify your habits, and make the change. And yeah, it's pretty powerful.
Sweet. We're going to take one more quick left turn into waste removal here, and then we're going to proceed to wrap up. You've left so many good insights here, and I really appreciate that. But you mentioned to me a couple times that construction is the largest waste contributor, probably globally. How do you think we can do a better job at reducing our carbon footprint on job sites?
That's a really good question again. So certainly in Canada, I believe construction is the largest contributor to waste. It often boils, reduce, reuse, and recycle has been around for years. And there's a reason why it sticks. Some things, if it's not broken, don't change it. So it starts with reduction. So how on a job site can we reduce waste? That's when we're looking at over ordering or too large of offcuts. If we have 5-foot offcuts on 2x4s, you're probably not doing your job right. Same with drywall. If we have like 25% scrap rate on drywall, probably not doing your job right. If the project manager orders 50% too much building supplies and decides not to get it transported to a new job site and decides to scrap it, probably not doing your job right. So I think it starts with awareness of waste and trying to mitigate it. And there's a lot of conversations around lean in construction right now. I believe Toyota kind of pioneered that. Some of our clients in Vancouver are really focused on lean tactics. We've got things like LEAD as well, not to drop all the acronyms, but LEAD is something we're very involved in, where we hold the construction companies accountable through diversion tracking. Because we have the onboard weighing systems in the truck, we can calculate the total weight that was recycled versus thrown out and give them the metric reporting per building or per project or per company. So that's a big one. And then the last piece is just on the recycling side. Recycling is getting better. Recycling isn't as good as reduction, I would say, but recycling is better than the landfill. And recycling is a tricky one to talk about on a global scale, because every city, not even every province or every country, but every city does it a little bit differently. So comparing, say, the city of Vancouver to the city of Toronto, they're not on the same scale. And I'm not sure which one is doing a better or worse job, but generally someone will pioneer something like, maybe in the 80s or whenever it was, drywall needs to be recycled. Okay, now we recycle drywall. That's a good start. Then someone said clean wood needs to be recycled and not end up in the landfill. Okay, good start. Then someone said metal and electronics. Metal's been around forever because it actually has a pretty obvious value, so it makes sense to recycle it because you get paid for it. Whereas something like clean wood, you're still paying by weight to, drop it off. It's just at a lower cost because it has more value than, say, dropping off a mixed load of garbage that may get sifted through, and a lot of that ends up in the landfill. But it starts with awareness. It starts with training. A lot of people, when I answer this question, a lot of people will say, well, if you want companies to be better at managing their waste, aren't you just putting yourself out of a job? And the question, honestly, the answer is we're entrepreneurial. So if someone came to me one day and said, construction companies don't produce waste anymore, so your company is no more, it's no longer relevant. Great, that's awesome. We did our job. We helped people learn. To be quite frank, construction waste being non-existent is not going to be achievable in our lifetime. Probably not our kids' lifetimes. We'll see what happens with third generation. But yeah, just start with reduction for sure.
Yeah, I know that there is some conversations and some people that are deploying the flat pack model for housing, and they're able to reduce the load on, say, a typical single family home that's built modularly to less than a garbage can full of waste, but it's not quite there yet. So I think you're right. It's something we need to work towards, and it's going to, hopefully get there at some point. But, I see it a lot. You see it a lot. Being on construction sites, we all know how much we waste. So it's just a PSA to anybody out there when you're cutting wood or doing your install. It's one thing to have the mentality that the company's paying for it, and it's easier on yourself. But even on my job site that I'm on right now, we're trying to order pre-cut pieces of metal, strut, rod, things like that, instead of buying a 10-foot length and cutting it up 3 pieces and you're throwing a foot out. Why not ask the manufacturer to sell us the length that we need, so that they can retain the metal and we can have exactly what we need, and it helps increase efficiency. So I think also trying to find alternate ways to work with your suppliers and trying to get them to provide you exactly what you need, so that you're not wasting time even cutting. It just comes to site prepackaged in lengths, and there you go. You're on your way.
Yeah. I did want to say one other thing is that we've partnered with Waste Management recently, and they provide the bids and we provide the live loading in Vancouver, which is, when we send the truck team in to load it out. And I think traditionally people think just drop a bin and fill it up. That's the classic construction mentality. When we say that,
So classic.
you know what I mean? It's just that's what people do. That's just that. Just put the bin there and fill it, and when it's full, the company picks it up. And I know that when we say we'll send a truck team in to live load the material into our truck and separate material on the fly and make sure it gets recycled, they almost drop their jaws and been like, where have you been all my life? And so we're not here to replace bins by any means. That's why we have this partnership. But we're also, there's a time and a place to not just throw a bin down. And on these larger developments, there's not a need for our service because you need, a 40-yard container of wood, of drywall, of metal. And so it's so much volume that it doesn't make sense to live load it. But a lot of these job sites, when you're, on a 10-story tenant improvement project in downtown Vancouver, and there's this pile of waste sitting there, it just makes sense to call a company like ours to send the crew in, load it out, stack the material so it gets recycled properly, drop it off, and try and keep the impact on on a minimal level. So.
Yeah, it makes sense. And lead, we're going through lead silver on my project right now, and it's similar requirements. Like you're contractually obligated to recycle. There's, 3 or 4 bins, and you have to do that. And there's penalties if you don't. That's, that's what the client wants, and it makes sense. That's the way we're going to build it. And, we all have to do our part. So, thank you guys for doing that. It's amazing. It's great to see people hustling, but also giving back in the industry. And with all that being said, I want to get into just a couple more personal questions to round off the episode before we sign off here. You mentioned Atomic Habits. You're listening to books. What do you think the most impactful book as an entrepreneur has been that you've read or listened to or consumed in your life?
Oh, I don't know if it was just time of life or it's just relevant, but Atomic Habits was a good one. James Clear really breaks down habits, and it's something we all have, and it's something that can kind of carry with you. I don't know if this one had the most impact as well, but another one is Relentless by Tim Grover. He is the mental and physical trainer for Kobe Bryant, Dwayne Wade, and Michael Jordan, and he really installed some pretty strong grit into how they operate and leverage their skill sets to make them become who they are. But yeah, I would say those two are pretty interesting on the development side of things.
One of the books that you actually recommended to me that I still have on my shelf is The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team.
Oh, that's a good one. I should have said that.
That's another good one. Well, I credit you to that one. I've passed it on when I came out here to Toronto and I was managing a division of a company. I made my staff read it, and it makes an impact. It's a good book. So shout out to you for that one. If you think back to your days snowboarding, Coors Light, janitor, trying to make it all work and figure out what you want to do, if you were able to go back to that point in time, maybe before you had your accident, you had to leave because you broke your ankle, what would you say to yourself? What kind of conversation would you have with the younger Barry?
Oh, I would say trust your instinct, because even if it's wrong, you'll still feel good about following through on what you believe in. There's been many times where I just didn't follow through on what my gut was telling me, and you never feel good about it. I don't know. There's something about just going with your intuition and making like values-based decisions that, regardless if you win or lose, it just feels right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at a younger self, in your late teens or early 20s, it's rare for people to start identifying purpose and values at that young of an age. And I don't know if the teachers are doing it these days, but we certainly didn't talk about like core values and purpose in high school. We talked about how to do algebra, which I still don't understand how to do. Bare minimum, we should have been talking about credit card interest and how compound effect works. But anyways, that's
You're here.
podcast.
Exactly. Well, you know what? This has been super fun. I knew your story, but I didn't know it as well as I do now. And I'm thankful that you were able to spend an hour with me and share so many great things. And I hope that anybody listening is able to learn from you. And I consider you a leader in the industry in construction, and it's inspiring to see what you guys are able to accomplish and what you've done with your lives. And I hope that you're able to continue to push forward and reach new heights with the business and personally. And with getting married in a year, that's another big step. Is there anything else that you want to leave behind for people to think about before we sign off?
Well, thank you for wrapping up in such an elegant way. I appreciate that.
No problem.
I would say if you're very driven and determined, which I'm guessing a lot of people are, because why else would they be curious in learning about a podcast kind of surrounded around improvement and development and increasing skill sets, specifically in construction. If you are that type of person, I think it's really important to pause and reflect and appreciate either what you've personally accomplished or what your team has accomplished before we move on to the next level. And I think too often we just keep go, 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 go. And it gets to a point where success becomes the norm, and therefore appreciation and reflection kind of it's just a backward thing that never happens. And I think it's important for people to not forget that, regardless of how old you are. If you're, 15 or 20 years old, or you're 95 years old, reflecting on your life, I think it's important to always pause and reflect.
Well, that's great. Where can people find out about 505? If anybody wants to get in touch with Scott or yourself, lay out the contact info for me.
Ooh, absolutely. Well, quick Google search will spin up a lot of interesting stories about us. But our website's 505junk.com. Our marketing coordinator, Neil's actually just going through rebuilding a lot of those pages there. Social media, we're on most of the channels. You can find us on LinkedIn, Scott Foran or Barry Hartman. You can find 505 Junk on there, as well as Instagram and Facebook. We're trying to share a lot of our stories. We just announced a big shoreline cleanup in Delta coming up, where we're looking for volunteers. We've done over 13,000 pounds removed from the oceans there over the last few years. So that seems to be growing more and more every year. And we're more about engagement than just kind of pushing ourselves or our brand or our story. So come email us, chat, Instagram, whatever you want to do. We'll be replying all day.
Perfect. And I will link to all of that stuff at toolspodcast.com for anybody interested. You can head over there to toolspodcast.com/505, and all the links to all the great stuff and some pictures of the things that you guys have accomplished will be up there. Maybe with your permission, I'll throw a picture of you with long hair standing in front of a truck. You look a lot different now on camera.
Yeah.
But Barry, it's been great. And thanks again so much for coming on Tools of the Trade.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great speaking with you, Colin.
That's a wrap. That's a wrap, everybody.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Tools of the Trade podcast. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and leave us a 5-star review. For show notes, blog posts, resources, and access to our newsletter, check out toolspodcast.com.